thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I was having fun with your videos. You have over 400 of them, as you know, but I learned.
About 1,000.
And you have 1,000 now?
Yeah, we have 1,000 videos.
Wow. You are like a college professor. I mean, you really are. I love listening to you. It's just really nice. And I'm the son of an engineer, by the way. So, engineering is in my blood, although the math gene pool didn't find its way to me because I can't do math. But first of all, let me, Dylan McCurchy, am I pronouncing your name right?
That is correct.
But your real name is Dylan Talks Tone, right?
That seems to be an alter ego that I've taken on. Yes.
I love it. I really, so we had Kevin Butts from Killer Bees Guitars, or Killer Bee Guitars on.
Yeah.
We just taped him a couple of days ago, and he couldn't stop gushing about you.
Oh, right on. Yeah, we've done a bunch of stuff with him.
Yeah, he's super nice guy, super talented guy. And, we do on our show, we interview guitar players, but we do spend a fair amount of time talking about gear. And I can't think of someone better than you to really take a deep dive into a real specific area about gear.
Okay.
So your main forte, and I've seen you talk about everything, but your main forte is guitar pickups.
Yes, because that's my real job. I wind them every day. That's what I do. So we have a .com e-commerce website where we sell direct, and we wind, I don't know, 200 pickups a month, probably something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, one thing, I was talking to Kevin, he was probably right and I was probably wrong, but I was talking about my fascination with the concept that there was a time when stringed instruments were not electric, and then at some point they were. And he thought it was Gibson who invented it. And I thought Gibson sort of became famous or perfected it, but didn't necessarily invent the guitar pickup. Do you know the answer to that, short of a Google?
So Seth Lover that's the Gibson, that's the humbucker we know. However, P90s came before that. Filtertrons actually came before that. And in the 30s, there was, I want to say it was either a Rickenbacker or a Gretsch, but I want to say Rickenbacker. If you Google frying pan electric guitar, it was a lap steel that literally looked like a frying pan, and it had a pickup in it. And I want to say it was, even if it wasn't Rickenbacker yet, or it wasn't Gretsch yet, it was like the forefather sort of one of those companies, and I can't remember which. And I really want to say like 1936 or something. So I don't know. I can't remember. I have a bad thing about not remembering important information because I have to remember all this other stuff. So if I have to look it up again to be right in a video, I'll just go look it up again.
Right. That makes, look, there's only so much room in your, is it your cache, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what amazes me about this is that some really creative, brilliant person thought, I know, since guitars can have metal strings, obviously they also had, gut, whatever. If they shake really, really, really fast, which they do, we could somehow replicate that sound, send it through wires, and we can electrify that sound. And I think just the fact that on one day that didn't exist, and a day later it did, is just shocking to me. It's brilliant because we all take it for granted today,
The funny thing is about all this guitar stuff, and I think it's really funny because people really want to dive into why a guitar does what it does. But when it really comes down to it, guitar technology is really, really rudimentary, and a pickup, all it is an electrical transducer. So it's the backwards of a speaker, basically.
Okay.
So when Alexander Graham Bell made a microphone and a speaker, then somebody along the way, and then they started recording music, And then somebody
Right.
along the way said, oh, let's make this louder. What do we have to do? Well, a speaker takes electrical impulses and turns it into vibration. Well, what if we took vibration and turned it into electrical impulses? It's just a
Ah,
backwards speaker. So really, as mystical as all of this is a lot of times, it's really just a reapplication, or a reapplication of another technology that was being developed. But you're right. I think that time period with Les Paul inventing multi-track recording and
right.
the pickup and all that stuff, it must have been an amazing time to see that stuff come alive, you know?
Yeah, now you know what you're making me think of? This, I love this concept. So if you take a magnet and you do it a certain way and you wrap a number of wires on it, you can create an electric motor,
Right.
which I did as a little kid. I had some electrical kit and I learned how to do it. But what you're saying is, dare I say, resonating with me. Because if you take that same motor and you turn the motor itself, then a current will come out of it because you're turning the magnet inside of the coils. So what I love, that's the metaphor for what you're saying about mic or guitar pickup versus speaker, right?
Yes. Yes. In
That's
fact, a lot of people I don't remember where you hear this term, but you used to see it in textbooks and stuff a long time ago, that a speaker was a motor. And I can't remember what they called that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It makes
So
sense.
the thing about motor is that term, we think of it as like an electric motor, like a Tesla to make a car go. But
Right.
really what that is it's the whole transducer concept. It's taking one type of energy and turning it into a different type of energy. So
Right.
with a speaker, you're taking electrical energy and turning it into kinetic energy. With a pickup, you're taking kinetic energy and turning it into electrical energy. Same exact thing with a Tesla motor. You're taking
Right.
electrical energy and turning it into kinetic energy. That's what motor really means. So that's really all we're doing. We just did a video on this. It just came out this past Monday, talking about that, because a lot of people they talk about the building materials in guitars as in like acoustic guitars and electric guitars, so they must be the same, but they're not. They're totally
Right.
different because of what you're saying.
That's really neat stuff. Now, let me ask you this, because we're talking also, I guess we have to be talking about speakers. So for me, late 70s, early 80s, when I was a kid trying desperately to afford good stuff for my guitar, I was told and believed in, the bigger the magnet, all other things being equal, the better the speaker. And I remember I bought, I got some $15-20 used amp with a bad built-in speaker. And I remember I saved up a lot of money and I got some crazy speaker that had, I don't think it was an EV, it was a more esoteric company. I forget, not Altec, but something cool, maybe Eminence or something, had a 10-pound magnet or something insane like that. And I remember it, to my perception as, a kid in 10th, 11th grade, it turned my crappy $15 used amp into something really special. And as I understood it, the larger magnet made my speaker more efficient, which meant 10 or 15 watts or whatever it was, accomplished a lot more with a more efficient speaker. Is any of that accurate?
So I'm not 100% an expert on that end of the signal chain. However,
Okay.
from my hi-fi, like in guitar stuff, but from the hi-fi side of it, from like the audiophile side of it, speaker efficiency is a massive, massive thing. And I
Right.
know that not necessarily the size of the magnet, but the strength of the magnet,
Okay.
proportionate to the diameter of the voice coil and the depth of the voice coil and the weight of the cone and all that stuff. That's a whole nother rabbit hole of science. But overall efficiency, you're right. If you had a really low efficiency speaker with 15
Yeah.
watts versus a really high efficiency speaker with 15 watts, it would completely change everything. That's why even as simple as having like a Blues Junior or something and changing out the speaker, it completely changes your life, because the amp it loads the amp differently. It
Right.
it does, which makes the tubes act different. Like it does everything different. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole for sure.
All right, I got one more rabbit hole before we go further into
Okay.
pickups. I've tried a bunch of times to tell on our show the origin story of the Mesa Boogie amp, and my sort of 38% accurate version is something along the lines of some guy who fixed amps for a living or on the side played a good trick on a friend and took like a Princeton champ amp and put the guts of a Marshall inside and said, "Here's your champ amp back." And his friend said, "Holy crap," that kind of thing. Is that sort of, if you know the origin story of Mesa?
I don't at all.
Oh, okay.
I
So we're
don't
going to stick
know.
with that.
I don't know at all. I do know that a lot of those brands, not the legacy ones like Fender, but
Yeah.
all of them were just, and even all this stuff really is just somebody saying, "Oh, let me take that normal thing that was already in existence and just change it a little bit." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of those things where mm, I just don't, I hate to say I don't care because that makes me sound like I don't care, but it's not a place where I put a lot of energy. Uh,
Right.
is that stuff.
Right. That makes sense. Now, all right. So let me take us to pickups, and the first question I have, I want to hit you with a kindergarten question, and I think we've started in the right direction.
Okay.
So we're taking the kinetic energy of strings, right? So there's some P90s behind me, right? The string vibrates, all good and fine, because now we know that it's going to do something to the pole of the magnet, and this is where I'm going to not know anymore in a second. It's going to do something to the magnet that somehow reacts to the coils that circle the magnet. And here's where I get tripped up in terms of understanding the science behind it. How does the signal that's coming out know all the nuances of what's happening to the, say, the low E string or the high E string for that matter? That's what I don't get. How does that pickup translate all that?
Because um, the string, it doesn't do something to the magnet. The magnetic field, the string in its idle position resides within the magnetic field.
Oh,
So
okay.
the way I try to this is a stupid illustration, and it's not 100% accurate, but it makes it for an easier visualization. If you were to, like the upside down bowl of Jello, if
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
to just stick your finger in a bowl of Jello,
Right,
and so now your finger is inside the, like, in down in the bowl of Jello, right? Then
right,
you start to shake your finger,
right.
then the whole bowl of Jello starts to move. It affects the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
That's
I
not
got you.
100% accurate, but it's an easier visualization than magic. So the
Right.
string is residing within that magnetic field. So then when it moves,
Oh,
every nuance of the movement then creates so like it's an AC circuit. It's a alternating
it's
current
an
circuit.
it's an AC circuit?
Yes, sir. So,
Really?
yep. So when the string moves one way, the voltage travels one direction, and when the string moves one way, it travels the other direction. And travel, people are going to get in the comment section and, electricity doesn't travel, but just for visualization purposes,
Yeah, yeah.
you're creating an AC voltage every time the string goes back and forth or moves around. So it that is the key. So the trick is, to an accurate pickup, is you don't want it to be, you don't you don't want the resistance to be so high. You don't want the capacitance within the coil to be so high. You don't want the magnetic field to be super strong. So there's all these balancing acts,
Right.
because everything affects everything.
And let me jump in. Is this metaphor probably won't work, but is by and large a pickup binary, meaning there's just two things going on, a magnet and coil? Are those the two primary ingredients, so to speak? Because when you say capacitance, I think of a capacitor,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think there's capacitors per se, like, those little flat pancake doohickeys with the wires. They're not in a pickup, right?
No, but the theory of capacitance is within a pickup. Basically, anytime you have two wires laying next to each other, basically what
Okay.
happens is, because quote unquote electricity travels on the outside of a wire, it can
Okay.
um, it can be lost onto the other wire
Okay.
in the form of capacitive loss. So
Okay.
that's why a tighter wound coil with more, like let's say a smaller gauge, the smaller the gauge wire and the more
Right.
windings that are on it, it can lose more highs because the resistance is higher, the capacitance is higher, and it causes all of that. But back to your original question,
Yeah.
that basically it's wire wrapped around magnets,
Right.
basically. But every little aspect affects the final result. When it comes to the height of the coil, how tall a coil is, um, how wide. So like a P90 bobbin, um, the coil is wider. So some of the inductance that happens in the coil happens further out in the magnetic field. Um,
Wow.
a Telecaster pickup in the bridge is very similar in dimension to a Stratocaster pickup. However,
Right.
so you could wind them exactly the same way. However, because it has the metal base plate on the bottom, it changes the shape of the magnetic field. So
Oh my God.
where in the coil the inductance happens, whether it's at the center versus towards the out to the edge, plus the height of the coil. So if I take a Strat pickup and I make it 10 or 15 thousandths taller, totally sounds different.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really fun to play with all that. That is the fun, is
So
designing that stuff.
you're a cook, you're an artist, and it's really like, I thought of pasta, right? Pasta is maybe two or three ingredients. It could be flour, water, and egg. And and there are people. I mean, I took a deep dive on YouTube and watched some master pasta folks, and they talk as seriously as you just did. There's so much nuance. There's so much technique, and I love the juxtaposition of the fact that, by and large, you're making a two ingredient dish, and there's so much subtlety and variation, and then how, and this is what, I have no clue how you can take the science you're talking about, right, and then I think I know the answer, but you'll tell us, and then how you translate that into saying, I want a warmer sound, I want a hotter sound, I want a brighter sound, I want a more versatile sound, you know and you know you're putting all that together, and once you got the science, right, now you have to make something that sounds beautiful or harsh or whatever you're trying to accomplish, and you tell us, but I think I know what the answer is.
So, I mean, the easy way to say it is trial and error.
That's what I was thinking, yeah,
But
but
there
yeah.
are I like certain magnets more than others. I have certain goals with the pickups that I make, overall, like brand wide.
Yeah.
So there are certain things I really care about clarity. I don't like muddy stuff at all. So I really care about
Yeah.
clarity, and I really care about, so there's the capacitance thing. So
Right.
that's how the wire goes onto the coil. Actually, no matter what wire I use, how it goes onto the coil is important to me. Um, so there's all kinds of little things, and there are some rules of thumb. This magnet will do this in general. However, if I
Okay.
compensate the height of the coil, or how much wire we use, or what kind of wire we use, I can offset what that magnet is known for and create something totally new, which makes my job on the marketing side very difficult, because the guitar industry is so like, well, Alnico 5s sound like this, ceramics sound like this, everything sounds a certain way because you're told in a magazine in 1978. So when I come up with some crazy idea to do something wacky, it's hard to tell somebody, no, what it says on paper isn't what it sounds like. Just try it. It's a really hard thing to do. But to me, that's the fun part, is messing with it.
Yeah. I mean, and I would think the musicians who are interested in their art would want to try the stuff that's a little different. And let me start with this. So, you talked and then I referenced the P90. That's one of the very first pickups ever designed, right?
Yep.
Certainly in the early stage. What's so special, if at all, or is it just that we're familiar with the sound and we've grown to love the sound that it generates? Or, and if you can describe for us the architecture of a P90, and then we could talk about why is it so enduring.
Is there going to be video to this, or is it just audio?
Oh, you're on video. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you can show it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's going to air on video.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Because I happen to have an assembled and a partially assembled P90 right here.
Oh, now because I'm really old, I have to get close to my screen to look at you. They'll have to stare at my ugly face now. All right.
Let's see if we can get this autofocus to work correctly. So here's a P90, right?
Okay. Yep.
The architecture of a P90, try to get this autofocus to work right. So the architecture of a P90 is a 1/4 inch tall bobbin.
Okay. Now, so what is the bobbin? Is that just the base to the top?
It's just the what the wire is wrapped around. So
okay.
Yeah, what the wire is wrapped around. And then and then you've got the 6 screws coming through the bottom, or through the top, out the bottom. Okay. Right. And it's 10,000 winds of 42 gauge wire. That's the way Gibson did it in 1950. They started doing it this way in about 1956. Prior to that, they used like a pole piece magnet, like a Strat, and pressed it through here.
Okay.
Before that, but the one we know started in around 19, and I could totally get this wrong. Let's see. No, I had a 53 Gibson one time that had this kind of, so in the early 50s anyway, because I think P90 started in like 48-ish, something like that. So early 50s, I went to this screw arrangement. Now I've got one without the base plate on it. So now underneath of it is, so this is the same thing. In fact, we can take the magnets off. And it's the same thing. See, it's just the bobbin with the 10,000 winds of copper on it. So now we've got 2 humbucker magnets. One goes on the bottom on one side, and the other one goes on the bobbin on the other side. So this is a ton of magnet. This is a ton of magnet. And what a lot of people don't know either is that the edge of the magnet is what is magnetized. So when you say north or south, it's not the flat side, it's the skinny side. So so on a humbucker one anyway. So there you go. So there is your general construction of a P90. So
is a P90 a humbucker?
No, it isn't. It is a single coil. So
that's what I thought.
So then came along the humbucker. Now remember, we had 10,000 winds of 42 gauge wire on the P90. Yeah. And Seth Leverett says, well, let's take 2 coils. We'll wind them out of phase with each other. And we'll make a humbucker so that it will be hum canceling. And
that's where humbucker comes from.
And everybody wants to get all crazy about what this means. But really what they did was they said, well, let's just put 5,000 winds on one side and 5,000 winds on the other side. So now you have the 10,000 of the P90, and then we'll put a magnet in the middle. So instead of being one on both sides, now you have a magnet in the middle between them.
Oh, okay.
And there's your humbucker.
And that's amazing. And what is the function of the screws? They're physically touching the magnet, aren't they?
They are. And so what that does is it takes the magnet and it transfers the magnetism through the slugs on the slug side and the screws on the screw side to be magnetic at the top.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
So like a Firebird for example, would just take this bar magnet and stick it right inside the bobbin. That's what a Firebird does, right? So instead of that, the humbucker, and really these parts came as a result of just saying, let's split the P90 in half so that it hum cancels. But of course, the architecture changed, therefore the tone changed. And when you humbucker something, when you hum cancel something, the 60 hertz hum goes away, but so does some other things. The mid-range pokes a little bit differently, and the tone totally changes. And that's why the pickup sounds so different. Personally, my favorite pickup of all time is a P90. I'm
really,
yeah, and I say this on every podcast, everywhere I ever go, but I don't brag about much about what I do, but we make the best P90s in the world because they are my favorite pickup, and I love them, and I spent a lot of time to get them right. I could go on about P90s all day. I love them.
Let's do it. So let's talk about P90s, because the first thing I was going to ask you, and you sort of gave me the answer. Why are they rectangular? And I looked at the magnet, the architecture, not the shape, not the architecture, the shape of the magnet. So I almost feel, my kids go to school in New Orleans, and there are folks there who are really traditional. We'll talk about food. If they want to make a roux, and you have the holy trinity for the roux, which I think is peppers, onions, and celery or something like that, right? And they will respect the tradition, they will honor the tradition, and then do their very best to flavor, so to speak, the tradition. And I feel like you're doing that with the P90, because in 1930 or 48, let's call it, with the P90, someone determined 10,000 wines, and that's interesting to me, because you're paying respect to 80-year-old technology, but making it better in probably incredibly subtle and technical ways, because you could wind 10,000 coils, if I'm using the right terminology, a billion different ways once you're doing it, right?
Yeah. So our kind of slogan around here is, in fact, on our website and stuff, is Dylan Talks Tone, the new vintage, because I like the way I've got a Les Paul Jr. back there. Well, it's an SG Junior, but that's like the 61, 63 Les Paul Jr., but that's a reissue. But that's my favorite guitar. One of them. And I love P90s, and I've had early 50s guitars with P90s in them. I've played a bunch of them. This design that we have is based off of, it's actually based off of Greg Martin from the Kentucky Headhunters. His 56 Les Paul Jr. My buddy has that guitar now, and we use that guitar to come to the tone because I love that sound. But it's all made with modern parts that I can readily get. So the idea is everything we make, I don't use vintage, quote unquote, vintage correct parts. We do not use any kind of unobtainium magnets or wire or anything I don't use that stuff. It's right. There are companies that do, and their pickups are $800 a pair, that kind of stuff. We don't do that. My idea is, let me figure out what they did, what really matters, and make them. That's why we call it the new vintage, because it's stuff that I can get, but it still sounds like it's old. That's the goal.
It's really amazing to me. Well, first of all, that's such a wonderful, in my opinion, such a wonderful perspective and approach, because the other route is making this technology inaccessible to 99.9% of the musicians out there. But the other thing that I think it does is it frees you to say, all right, these are my parameters for my roux, but I'm going to make a better roux than anyone's ever made. And I will aspire to do that while still respecting the tradition, but using certain things that I have that they didn't have in 1948 or 50 or 55 or 60 or what have you.
Yeah. And for me, it's about, first of all, accessibility. Even though we make a quote unquote boutique handmade product, they're not ridiculous expensive.
Right.
So most people that own a made in Mexico Stratocaster or a Epiphone, you know, Les Paul can afford to upgrade their guitars with this stuff. Like that to me
Right.
that's really important. Um, the other thing is it also frees me up to be able to do wackier stuff. So,
Yeah.
you know, we have a few designs like our DAF humbucker. One of my buddies named it for me. Dylan applied for. So that's our PAF copy.
Okay.
Although most people these days call it Dylan AF, but
Oh, that's
it's
funny.
yeah,
Yeah, I like
it's
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's that's our PAF, and I mean, I think in 2016 that guy like the top of the top 10 in Premier Guitar, you know, PAF copies. So I'm pretty proud of that. And then
As you should be. Yeah.
we have some pretty really good tele pickups that are based on a 66 Telecaster that I got my hands on. And then our Strat pickups are based on probably can't even probably shouldn't tell you the guitars that I got my hands on to make those. So but you know the guitars.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things where I was able to get a hold of some really cool stuff and make a really cool baseline of parts for the major models. But then from there, say, okay, now let's get wacky. Let's do something crazy. Let's try. Well, our most popular pickup is our center punch humbucker that doesn't volume drop when you coil split it. That was a lot of work to get that right.
That we talked about that with Kevin. He's
Yeah.
in love with that. I mean, it's brilliant what you did.
Yeah, and actually what we did for him was even different. So he doesn't have our regular center punch humbucker. He has one that I designed proprietary for him. That's actually blades. That thing is unbelievably good. Unbelievable. That pickup is so good. But like the center punch humbucker, literally came from, you know, the one we sell to everybody. It literally came from one day, like playing a guitar, and I was like coil splitting it, and I was like, this volume drops so bad. How can I fix this? And I didn't want to do like the PRS thing where we put a resistor in there and do wacky stuff. I was like,
Because a resistor is that's going to mute your sound, right? There's
yes,
going to be some kind of loss if you do that, right?
yes. Every time you add a component in a guitar, whether it be a capacitor, a pot, whatever, a resistor,
Right.
a volume mod, you know, any kind of treble bleed in a passive guitar is a completely subtractive circuit. So the string and the pickup straight to the output jack is as pure as you can get. And
Right.
anything you add from there is taking away from that.
It makes
So
perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah. So to do this without any shenanigans was a lot of work, but we figured it out and it works really, really awesome. And again, that is a non-traditional design that is very, very popular. We sell, I don't know how many of those a month, like tons, but it was outside of I'm proud of having a product that is not a quote unquote vintage correct thing that is relatively different than normal idea that people really like, which is cool.
You know what's going to happen in 60 or 70 years, they'll be making vintage correct versions of your pickup.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I
Now,
hope
let me
so.
ask you this. So you got your hands, I think you said a 66 Telly,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what is the process of reverse engineering? You know, so you've got that pickup, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you've checked out the guitar, you've decided, you know, you love the tone, and you want to reverse engineer it so you can, you know, put, you know, in a respectful way to the original design, make it your own. What do you do? Do you actually like take it apart? Do you count the coils?
No, so that's the tricky part. I mean, I've done
Okay.
stuff where, you know, a set of pickups is worth 50 grand, you know, and you're like literally sitting there not wanting to harm these things. But basically taking a caliper, measuring the height of the coil,
Oh, okay. Right.
measuring the dimension of the coil to understand how tightly it was wound, because I can learn some of that stuff after a while. Like figuring out the diameter of the wire, figuring out what kind of wire it is, figuring out, and this is sometimes can be kind of a guess, but after doing it a bunch of times, you can kind of know, like the wire has insulation on it. So understanding how thick I think the insulation is on the wire, that's a huge one. Because there's two different main thicknesses, and there's about 4 different wires that have been used over the years on most things. So
Are they
understanding,
plastic or painted on almost?
well, they paint it on, but like the old school stuff is called plain enamel, and it is an enamel wire that is put on. It's an enamel coating that's put on the wire. The problem is that the old stuff from like the 50s and 60s becomes very, very brittle over time, and it breaks down and shorts out. So that's why like old Fender Strats and Tellys and stuff, their pickups go bad.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so they switched to a heavy form var, which is it's the same inside, but it's a thicker and different type of coating on the outside.
But doesn't that affect our capacitance?
It affects everything because
Okay.
there's more space now between
Right.
each of the
Yeah.
coils. So understanding all those thicknesses and stuff, and then we don't use any of that wire. I use polynylon, which is probably 5 or 8 years ago. If you said I use polynylon wire on pickups, people would be like, you're making cheap crap because you're trying to save money. But what I'm really trying to do is understand how we can use that wire to make the same sound in the old pickups because it's obtainable and because it's serviceable and because my pickups are going to be working in 60 years and plain enamel ones are not. So longevity, not sound that doesn't drift over time as the pickup wears out. I mean, as the insulation on the wire starts to break down, maybe the thing shorts and it changes how it sounds. Like all that stuff can happen. It doesn't always, and I wouldn't like plan on it like every day, but I don't want that to happen to my stuff. So just understand, just getting it. I mean, just getting that stuff is hard.
Right.
So, and at the volume that we're doing, and we're small, man. Yeah, I mean, we're really small. You know, PRS is making like 15,000 guitars a month overseas. I'm making 200 sets of pickups a month. Like,
Right.
you know, this is small potatoes, but it's important. And I do still view it as a passion project, even though it keeps the lights on. I still view it as I want to love it and have fun doing it every day. So
Yeah.
keeping that side of it alive is important.
Yeah. I mean, we have that overused but wonderful expression: if you love what you do, you never have to work, kind of thing. But so when you use this product, what I haven't asked yet is, so I have so many questions. So first of all, you know, I'll you know, I have to get my knee MRI soon, and I'll look at that film, and I don't know. And I'm pretty in my day job, I'm a lawyer, and I review medical records and things like that. But I can't understand when a radiologist looks at a film and they could see a hairline fracture, or they could see a disc is a little out of whack or something like that. So I know what a pickup looks like. I once took a slab of wood and a neck from a classical guitar I bought at Englishtown auction, and I took apart a pickup and I put it in, and I literally used a nail to hold the bridge in, and I created sound. You know, I did that at 10th grade or something like that. So, but I know what the pickup looks like. How you can look at a pickup and have any concept as to how tightly those wires are worn. That's like me if I look at that, it's like me looking at an X-ray film. They all look the same. You could actually look at a pickup and just see how tightly it's wound.
To a point, yeah. And I
Okay,
can
that's
feel it,
amazing.
and I can feel it. I think it just comes from doing it myself and
Oh, right.
knowing when I wind this, what it feels like and what it looks like when it's done. And then if I can hold my hand a different way and make it come out a different way, and doing that just literally thousands of times. I think that's it. What's really funny about all of this is you could literally, like, there's so many people in so many forums all over the internets and Facebook and everywhere that totally dive into one little aspect of this. And one thing I did not say about the 66 Tele, for example,
Yeah.
is I also zoom out and look at the whole guitar, because what you're hearing is not the pickup. What you're hearing is the pickups and the pots and the cap
Right.
and everything else. So I'm like, okay, if this is what the cap, if this is the cap that they're using,
The
and this
cap
is
meaning.
the capacitor, the tone
Okay.
circuit.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
if
Yeah.
this is the tone circuit that they're using, and these are the pots, the volume and tone knobs that they're using, the value of those, and this is what I'm hearing. And then, because you have to kind of zoom out and do that. And I think people don't do that enough. They don't look at the whole thing as a system
Right.
before making
Yeah.
changes. So that's the thing you have to do also. Because I could take this pickup and put different pots in the guitar and a different cap in the guitar, and it would sound totally different. So, or it would act differently. So, when somebody,
And the bridge and the nut and all that stuff.
all that stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah.
understanding the whole thing as a system is important, which then gets into the whole rest of the guitar, which where my brain goes, like with the YouTube channel and stuff, is understanding the entire guitar, so that, like, the setup and how it feels and like all the things that it does, so that you can get a bigger picture of that. And then when you go back and look at one particular component, you're not barking up the wrong tree when you really should have been looking somewhere else. Like, because I think that happens a lot in these conversations. So trying to zoom out and look at the whole thing as a system.
So yeah, you are. Like, I keep trying these medical analogies. You're an orthopedist, but you're not doing it without looking at the whole physiology of your patient's body. You're looking at their health, their weight. If you're an orthopedist only looking at the bone, but you don't look at the fact that your client is either thin as a rail or perhaps obese, and not recognizing that that affects what you need to accomplish as an orthopedist, you're failing.
Yes.
And
That's pretty much it. The whole system.
right. Yeah.
It's funny you bring up orthopedists, because I have it was supposed to be a life-ending spinal injury. And so I am very familiar with
Oh,
x-rays and MRIs
wow.
and CT scans and whatnot. Yeah. I have two 8-inch rods and 8 5-inch screws and 2 replacement vertebra. I broke T4 to T7.
Oh my,
And
in the middle.
yeah,
Wow.
yep. And 5 and 6 were so bad that they had to basically replace them. And so I've got 2 titanium rods holding me up all the time.
Wow. And all your thoracic spine, not your lumbar
My
or your
thoracic.
cervical.
Yep.
Wow.
I had 28 degrees of deviation at T5, which means
Wow.
3 more and I would have been paraplegic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know
Well,
a lot more than I probably should about MRIs and
yeah.
CT scans and x-rays and stuff.
Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah. And it's sort of the same thing, while your docs are working on your spine, I'm going to guess that if you had a traumatic injury, other parts of your body were hurt, and
Oh,
they have to be looking at everything else. If you can't breathe, they're working. If your
yeah.
lungs are punctured, if you've got a pneumothorax going on, you know, if you can't breathe, it makes no sense to fix your spine because they're not going to have a patient anymore. You know?
Yeah. I broke
Yeah.
four vertebrae, 3 ribs, and my left shoulder blade all in the same day.
Oh,
Basically
that's it's not what
broken
we would call a
half.
good day. Oh
No, it
my
was not a good
God.
day. Nope.
Wow.
I still feel it as I'm sitting here right now. It's yeah, it was a life-changing
Wow.
situation for sure. Yep.
Wow. Well, we're all happy to have you with us and able to do the great stuff you're doing.
Yeah,
Wow.
thanks. Yeah.
Sure. Uh, so it's interesting. There was something I wanted to ask about. Now I'll ask it in a different context. So, from a mechanical point of view, because I don't know, when you coil the wires around the bobbin, which I love that that's the term because that's also a sewing term.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing that by hand or is there a machine that does it? And then my follow-up question is, are you in pain when you do it because of all your orthopedic injuries?
I can only do I can only work for 20 minutes at a time.
Wow.
20,
Okay.
30 minutes at a time. This, since we are on video,
Yeah.
is the machine that it does it all.
Oh, look at that.
So basically what you would see sitting in the driver's seat is this spins, and this armature over here holds whatever it's set up for humbuckers right now, but it would hold a humbucker bobbin on there. It spins
Right.
around, at however many RPM. And then this, I hand feed it over this guide right here onto
So in
the
other words,
bobbin.
you want to go left or laterally.
That is correct. Yep.
Now, your lateral action is really where the nuance in your pickup is, right? Because
The
you were saying
the lateral action and the tension of the wire is probably
because
the two most important.
you could hold back a little.
Yeah. So the spool
Okay.
sits. This is a 5-pound spool that's about 2/3 gone. So this sits on the floor, kind of like between my knees, and then I'm sitting there. I guess I use my right hand, and I just guide it back and forth through my fingers, back and forth.
Wow. Now, do you have to wear a glove so you don't?
Nope.
Because it's smooth. You're not going to get cut or anything like that. Oh, because you have the nylon on it, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's pretty slick. I mean, you have to be careful. There's some days where, if it's really hot or you're sweaty or whatever. I lived in a motorhome full time, going all over the country for 2 years and making pickups. And so there'd be days in certain weather conditions where you're like, oh man, this is, this sucks. But overall, it's no big deal. Just sit there and do it. Yep.
And that's amazing. So, so as you're sitting there with the spool and you're feeding, how tightly, and I don't know if this is the specific motion, we do also have a podcast, so some of it will be audio only. So I'm pressing my thumb on my forefinger, and whatever your technique is, the tighter you're holding it, the more tension you're creating, and that's affecting the sound that some guitar player is going to get for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you go on like pickup winding forums, all those dudes know how many grams or whatever of tension they have. I don't know. I just know how I feel. Like I've never measured it. I probably should, I guess, but I don't measure it. But I just know. I just know how I feel. And the other thing is, so here's the weird part. This is the trick. So like we're going to Colorado and going to Denver in May, and we're going to do 3 weekend pickup winding courses, and we're going to help people learn to wind pickups. And they're going to make their own set of pickups, which they'll make one set. And I guarantee you that they will make a set that'll work and it'll sound pretty good.
Yeah.
The trick is the tension and the scatter and all that stuff.
The scatter is the lateral movement we talked about.
Correct. Right? Yep.
Okay.
And the tension is how tight you hold it. Those are the 2 biggest things for duplicating it again.
Gotcha. Right.
So where one person will go to that class, they'll make one set of pickups for their guitar and it'll sound great in that guitar. The trick then is to do that thousands of times and have them all come out the same way. So for me to do it by hand and hold the tension, like it's like tuning a guitar by ear. Like you can't do that right away. Like, and some people never really get that good at it. Like, because their tone, their sense of timbre is not awesome. But as they learn, they get better at it. And, you get really good musicians where they strum a chord and then just reach over and tune the guitar up. Right. Like,
I've seen that. Yeah.
And it's dead on. It's the same thing with this stuff. In order to duplicate that every time for that consistency, that's the important part. So it's to the point now where, like on bigger orders, there was a couple of orders in, I don't know, November or something, where we made like 250 pickups for 175 pickups for one customer.
Wow.
And of course you want those all to be consistent. Because if I'm sending a set to Japan, I'm sending a set to Germany, I'm sending a set to wherever, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but those people are never going to talk and find out if those pickups sound exactly the same. But if I'm sending, 100 guitars worth of pickups to one person, he's going to be able to put them in all those guitars and play them back to back and see if they sound the same. So
Right.
it's really, really important to make sure that we get that stuff consistent, and then measure them all afterwards and make sure they're within tolerances and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
that's where the practice comes in.
So now when you say this is just beyond fascinating. So when you say, it really is. So, when you say measure them,
Mhm.
what, walk us through that, because I could see how you would measure to make sure there's not a short, to make sure that, they work, right?
Mhm.
But if you want to make sure that there's reasonable consistency, I guess you could, measure capacitance, a new term I learned today. I knew the word capacitor, but not capacitance. But do you have something to measure that? Is that one of the
Yes.
measurements? Okay.
So I don't typically measure that except for in
Okay.
the design phase. In the design phase, I measure the strength of the magnets with a Gauss meter, which is basically it's a Tesla meter, which is you hold it up to the magnet and it tells you how strong the magnet is. Because I
Okay.
also magnetize all of my magnets by hand. When we get magnets, they are not magnetized; they're just all in a bag. So
Wow.
so every magnet that goes into like a Strat pickup.
Okay.
So, like next month, I think I need to make 75 sets of Strat pickups for somebody.
Okay.
We have
Right.
to magnetize all these magnets. So, and get them consistent. So we literally just pass them between two other magnets and we magnetize them. But then I have a Tesla meter that I measure to make sure that the magnets are consistent. So in the design phase of the pickup, we take the pickup we were looking at, let's say it's some Strat pickup from 1965, and we measure the Gauss of those magnets and see what it is.
Ah,
And then we measure the Gauss of my magnets and I make sure I magnetize them to the same level. And then we measure the inductance, which is measured in henries. So you'll hear the term henries or millihenries sometimes. And
right.
what that is, like a Strat pickup is typically like 1.9 to like 2.3 henries, something like that. That measurement, what I like to say is that's kind of the overall efficiency of the coil. That's like the overall
Okay.
performance of the coil.
So tell us what a Henry is,
It is a
because I've heard
measure.
the term.
It's a measure of inductance.
Okay.
Inductance is how you measure how good a coil works, basically.
Okay.
So
Right.
resistance won't tell you anything. It'll just tell you that the coil is one complete coil of wire, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And the resistance will also tell you
How much you
approximately,
lose, right?
no, it actually tells you how long the coil is in relation to another coil that's constructed in the same way.
Okay.
So if
Okay.
we take two Strat pickups and we measure one and it says 7.2K, and we measure the other one and it says 6.1K, and we use the same wire and they're the same size, we can extrapolate that the one with the higher number has more turns of wire on it, thus making the
Okay.
wire longer, making it more
Okay.
resistant. So when you see pickup measurements in magazines and in catalogs, it'll say this humbucker is 8.2K, and then this humbucker is 10.5K. Whoa, that's way hotter. That's what people say. That's kind of a
Yeah.
dumb, it's not accurate. DC resistance is not accurate to how the pickup's going to sound. The inductance with the resistance and the strength of the magnets together gives you an idea of how the pickup sounds. So those
What
two
is the
things together.
sort of the dumbed down definition of inductance?
It is literally the efficiency of the coil. It's
Okay.
how, yeah, it's how uh I guess it's the easiest way to say it is like it gives you a relative idea of the potential of the coil to make electricity.
I got you. So in other words, if you have a high inductance coil, the output from that eventual guitar will give you a little bit more of a greater signal, lightening the load of your preamp than one with lower inductance, or no?
That Yes, however, this is where you get really into the weeds, because that is controlled. This is where it's nuts. So we're getting
Yeah.
way deep here, but that's where it's controlled. What controls that is how many wines are on it,
Right.
how close the wires are together, and the dimension of it in relation to the magnets. But here's the thing, and how much
Yeah.
capacitance is in there too. All those things together, because within electrical theory is also frequency. So
Oh,
as each of those things change, the resonant peak of the pickup changes. What resonant peak means is the resonant peak is it can make from a low frequency to a high frequency, right? Like a strat pickup can
yep.
go from low frequency to a high frequency. But there's always one area where it makes it the best and the easiest and the most efficiently. That's a really dumbed down version of way of saying the resonant peak of the pickup.
I understand. It's
As
best at producing a certain frequency. That's its
correct,
sweet spot. Okay. Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
As you move any of those other things, the inductance, the resistance, the capacitance, the magnetic strength, and the size of the magnetic field within relation to the coil, then that resonant peak moves around.
Oh, okay.
So that's the whole thing. So you have all these variables that you can play with to move that resonant peak around. So when you have this pickup that's like, oh, it makes great lows, but it's super muddy, or this pickup's like an ice pick, like an old Telecaster, like, makes
The
super,
bright.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can curve those things, and everything's not linear either. So like you make a change and it affects some other stuff. And so that is the trick, is keeping all that straight and coming up with the end result you want 90%
Wow.
of the time 90% of the time,
Right.
because there's a lot of known quantities, because we had so many guitars made over the years. Fender actually changes when they say they come out with a new model. They literally change the pickup recipe for every guitar. So somewhere is some magic book that's like 3,000 different wind counts and stuff. It's literally a literal book with all of it in it.
Wow.
A little bird told me that. And when they say this is a new noiseless pickup, this is a new whatever pickup, and you're like, yeah, whatever, it's probably the same as the other one, they just stuck it in. No, they actually change it just a little bit. So there's so much known quantity in the world of all of this stuff that you can narrow it down pretty quickly and be like, okay, if I want it to sound a certain way, okay, let me shoot for right here, make the set, see what it sounds like. It's a little off. Okay, now I know what to change from there. And usually I can get it right. I mean, I'm working on a set right now, prototyping some stuff, and I think it's going to take me 3 tries to get it right. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, we're working on, actually, I've got them right here. We're working on a set of pickups for the new import Silver Sky PRS. So,
Wow.
for an aftermarket, like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
upgrade sort
Right.
of deal. Um, the first set I made, it was like, yeah, they're good, but they're just basically Strat pickups. So I stuck them in another Strat, try again. Time 2, time 3, we'll probably get it right. But I was able to narrow that down quite a bit, just by what we know to already exist, if that makes sense.
It does. And you know what I was thinking about as you're describing that, you being the pasta maker who uses 2 or 3 ingredients. So as you're, you know, perfecting that pickup, you have 10,000 opportunities per pickup to adjust your lateral position and your tension. So in terms
Mhm.
of the subtle and less than subtle differences, forgetting your choice of magnet, your size of bobbin, your strength of magnet, all that kind of stuff, 10,000 times you have an opportunity to impact upon what what its performance will sound like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say that. I think in real life, I mean, we're
Right.
getting way into the weeds with all this stuff,
Yeah.
but I think in real life, it's not that complicated
Okay.
because everything is cumulative. So it's not like
Okay.
if I wind for 10 seconds kind of the wrong way, let's say it takes 8 minutes to wind a P90 and you're like 9 minutes to wind a P90, and for 30 seconds or something, you're like answering a text message and you kind of, whatever. It's not that
Okay.
critical because everything is cumulative. So
Yeah.
and all of this stuff is to say we get into the weeds to talk about it and say to talk about what the actual process is, but really you try stuff and you blow it up and you make it better. I
Wow. I
mean,
love that.
you
Yeah.
know, well, I come from a power sports background. That's how I broke my back. I used to design motorcycle parts for the power sports industry, for the off-road power sports industry.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and we would literally go blow up a motor and trying something. And yeah, it was a bad day, but you'd pick up the pieces and you'd be like, okay, what happened? Okay, let's not
Right.
do that again. And this doesn't cost $5,000 every time it happens. So this is
Right.
just the time investment to do it. So I'm willing, anybody who's familiar with my YouTube channel, I'm willing to buy a guitar and cut it apart. I'm willing to buy an amp and take it apart. I'm willing to cut a pickup in half and see what's inside. I don't care. We're just going to figure
Right.
it out.
I love that. I've done it with a
Yeah.
Guinness can. That's as far as I've gone
Hey,
to get that
but
little
see,
nitrous thing.
that's the thing. I mean, that's how I started
Yeah.
when I was a kid. You're like, what is in here? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, it's beyond cool.
yeah.
So I took a quick look. I think, yeah, we're right around at our sweet spot for our show for about 60 minutes. Um, I'm loving this. I wish we could go another hour. Let's do this. How do people find you? I found you very easily, but I want you to tell us how to find you, and both your channel and your stuff.
Oh, okay. So um our website where you can buy the stuff is dylantalkstone.com. That's
Dylan Talks Tone, Dylan. I think that's the only spelling I know of Dylan, but
that's correct.
talkstone.com. Yeah.
Yep. And then YouTube, if you just Google Dylan Talks Tone, I mean, it'll come up everywhere, but basically it's youtube.com/Dylan Talks Tone. We have Instagram so the fun part is we actually do some of this stuff live on Instagram. So we'll
Oh,
actually
that's really cool.
yeah, we'll wind to pick up live on Instagram. So if you ever want to see this actually happen, you can cruise over there. I try to do it like once a week lately. So Instagram.com/Dylan Talks Tone, Facebook.com/Dylan Talks Tone. And then we just started a podcast where we're having guests. So other industry professionals, this week it was who did we have this week? Oh, Blake from the Tone Mob podcast. We've had people from guitar cable companies and all, to talk about their art too. And that podcast is called Just Gonna Say It. And you can Google
I
that.
love that.
It's on.
Just gonna say it.
I say that all the time because I'm
I
pretty
love that. Yeah.
I say I'm just gonna say it because I'm pretty overly honest about reviews and stuff. That's probably why I don't get much free stuff. But anyway, Just Gonna Say It is on the Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google, all the places. That comes out every Tuesday. So every Monday we have like a technical how-to video. This coming Monday is going to be the Line 6 Catalyst 100 review. And then on Tuesdays, the podcast comes out on YouTube and all over the podcast land. On Wednesday, we have a news update. So we do a gear news, everything, the latest stuff that came out. That was today.
What's up with Fender? I saw one of those.
Yeah. So
I love that. Yeah.
That comes out Wednesday at noon. And then probably the funnest thing we do is a live stream every Thursday night at 8:00 Eastern time. And we just interact with anybody who's in the chat, people who are on Patreon, who have, written in early with questions, and just, hey, I have a question, I've got this guitar, whatever. I got a problem. Hey, what do you think about this new amp that just came out? Whatever. We just interact with everybody. And
Oh, I love it.
that's every Thursday. And it's really fun. My wife co-hosts it with me, runs all the feed and everything. So yeah, it's awesome.
That's fantastic. Very
Yeah, man.
cool. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I selfishly, I had a lot of fun. This is just fascinating, absolutely fascinating to me.
Well, I'm glad to do it.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great night. Thank you again.
Thank you.